grab some scissors and a Clark bar.
It's the only Clark bar.
Because we're about to meet the biggest nurse you've ever seen.
You yell or make noise, I'll tear your trachea out, and your last thought will be, holy shit, he really did it.
That's right, folks, we have only one more episode until the Season 2 finale of Reacher, which means another video where the people who've read the books laugh at how wrong my theories are. The season is really ramping up to an epic finale, and in this video we'll be answering whether or not Roscoe will return, how Senator Lavoie may play into all this, and just where on earth is Tony Swan. So be sure to like and subscribe so that next week you're notified as soon as my finale video drops. But in the meantime, let's check out episode 7. With the death of Detective Gaetano Russo, Reacher and the team are on the defensive. Langston will stop at nothing to take out Reacher and his team, and Reacher knows this is not a place for a young girl like Jane who was almost killed last episode. So Jane and Marlo will need a safe place to hide until Langston can be stopped for good. But everyone Reacher knows is already involved in this case. That is, everyone but Roscoe, the romantic lead from season 1. And as soon as Dixon hears another woman's name, she's like,
"Who's Roscoe?"
Reacher ends up sending Marlo and Jane to a friend of Dixon's in Buffalo.
Circuit City overrun by wild dogs.
Just until things cool off.
It won't be forever. We just need to kill a few more people.
Upstate New York. But does the mere mention of Roscoe mean she could show up in the finale? We did see Finley return for a brief cameo, and if she were to make an appearance, what better way than in the finale? But I'm gonna put this at about a 10% chance. So while O'Donnell and Dixon make sure Marlo and Jane get off on their way, Reacher is going to pay a visit to Lieutenant Marsh, Russo's boss who's been secretly working with Langston. Last episode, we learned Marsh was taking bribes from him in exchange for info on Reacher and his team, and it seems as though Marsh knows Reacher will be after him, considering he's caught packing a duffel bag full of cash and a gun. Now there's nothing that pisses Reacher off more than someone who messes with one of his friends, let alone someone who's also a dirty cop. So he gives him a deal, turn himself in and tell him where this deal is happening between Langston AM, or die. But Marsh claims he has no idea where this deal is taking place, but he knows someone who does. Remember that guy who got ran over last episode?
That's got to hurt. I don't care where you're from.
Well, it turns out he's still alive and in hospital. But before Reacher can head on over, Marsh lunges for his gun, and you can imagine what happens.
Everyone dies eventually.
Reacher grabs a stack of bills and finally pays Neely back for all those clothes, plane tickets, and accommodation he's been using throughout the season, something that was set up all the way back in episode 4.
I'll pay you back in 2 months.
Meanwhile, Dixon watches as O'Donnell works his dad magic, easing Jane's anxiety. This is a guy who said he'd never settle down, but now has his own family.
I am unattached for life.
If you've been watching my previous videos, I've long suspected O'Donnell, and to a lesser extent Dixon, as a secret villain. But with the two of them getting the shit kicked out of them and a knife stabbed in Dixon's shoulder, this is seeming less and less likely. But cut me a little slack, O'Donnell was first discovered in Reacher's trashed hotel room, he constantly accuses Tony Swan as being a bad guy, has a burner phone that his kids somehow call, and was suspiciously not around when that bomb was being set up at the end of episode 5. Maybe he's just a really good red herring. This episode also sees the conclusion to Operation Kite Runner, the SIU's investigation into military personnel using military planes to smuggle heroin out of Afghanistan. In episode 6, Reacher's commanding officer tells him to stop the investigation due to the bad look it would give the new colonel. It makes me question whether Fields and this colonel may have been involved as well. Regardless, Reacher goes ahead with taking down this operation when they hear a big deal is going down tonight. 2 years of their hard work has led to this moment, and thus Reacher asks his team if they are willing to defy their orders and follow him to do what is right, to which all of them agree. The search proves to be fruitful, with hundreds of pounds of heroin stashed within the spare tires of these trucks, and something I found very interesting is that Reacher is correct. In most cases, a warrant is not required in a military investigation. There just needs to be probable cause, and there doesn't even need to be anything written down on paper. But the bust goes sideways when the buyers arrive and cause a massive shootout, culminating in one of the criminals facing Reacher's swift justice.
You broke my leg.
I broke the fence. The fall broke your leg.
Which is similar to what he said to the guy in the heart attack in episode 3.
He was stopped by barbecue. He died from trans fats.
As you can imagine, Fields is none too pleased at Reacher's exploits, ultimately relieving everyone of their duty effective immediately, leaving Reacher to his fallback job, a nurse. Yes, if this guy came in as my nurse ready to give me a colonoscopy, I for sure wouldn't make it. After threatening to burst their suspect's urethra with a catheter, Reacher uncovers that this big trade-off between Langston and AM is happening sometime tomorrow at 5 AM. And when Reacher is done with this guy, he fills his intravenous up, which is definitely not good bedside manner. While leaving the hospital, Reacher and Neely find one of Langston's goons who is also conveniently dressed up like a nurse. I would not want to be a patient here. This confrontation ends with a one-on-one fight between Neely and this dude until Reacher comes in and saves the day.
Shit. I wanted to question him.
Luckily, this guy still has his phone on him, which Reacher uses to contact Langston. And I think this is like the third time in the season Reacher has killed one of Langston's guys and uses their phone to call him.
Is it done?
Not in the way you expected. Before you ask if it's done, it is.
Give me some good news.
Sure. You're down another man, but I left his body in the morgue for convenience.
Langston wants Reacher to meet him at New Age's research and development warehouse, where he will remain under watch until his deal with AM is finished, promising Reacher that he can then be released unharmed.
Sure, Jan.
Langston's captured Dixon and O'Donnell as added incentive. Now this is where a lot of setup for next episode comes into play. First, Reacher tells Langston that Neely was killed, allowing Neely to keep guard on the warehouse when he eventually goes in. Then there's the question of Senator Lavoie, who in episode 5 came to Reacher to strike a deal. In exchange for his resources, Reacher would keep the senator's involvement in this missile business hush-hush. These resources include 2 Navy SEALs and a Ranger who we haven't yet seen. Then there's this quick shot of Reacher taking out a brass fastener from the New Age employee list. I wonder if this will help him get out of handcuffs or some sort of confinement. Let's not forget that the fence surrounding the warehouse is electrified. They wouldn't have gone through this whole rigmarole of a kid throwing a beer can at it if this fence doesn't come into play somehow next episode.
Eat shit, narc.
I like that kid.
We also see AM inspect the missiles from the same guy who stole the transport truck in episode 5. Remember that AM has to do this deal in person because he holds on to these untraceable bearer bonds, and AM doesn't trust anyone but himself to hold on to them. With AM in possession of the money and the missiles, all he needs right now is Langston's engineer to insert the microchips. When this is done, AM will be in possession of 650 surface-to-air missiles that could wreak unfathomable havoc across the globe. Keep in mind, we haven't learned AM's real goal here, but I suspect with him being an arms dealer, he plans on reselling these missiles to terrorist groups across the world. I was also caught off guard by this final conversation between Reacher and Neely, in which Reacher is extremely pessimistic about life.
People live and then they die. Everyone dies eventually. This all went to shit, you wouldn't be the last member of the 1/10 for long. They'd kill you within 24 hours.
It isn't necessarily the most rousing speech you want to hear before embarking on a dangerous mission. With Neely watching from afar, Reacher makes his way inside the compound with Dixon and O'Donnell tied to gurneys. It definitely doesn't look good for Reacher, but keep in mind he's supposed to have these backup Navy SEALs and Rangers somewhere out there. Then there's the question of Tony Swan. Where is this guy? Marlowe told us that Swan was on her side, while the guy who opened fire at Franz's funeral said that it was Swan who hired him to undertake this shooting. Swan definitely has a lot of explaining to do, so I wouldn't be surprised if we'll see him next episode. According to IMDb, the last episode is titled Flyboy, so I wonder if we'll see someone flying out of a helicopter. Remember that Reacher did promise to kill Langston by throwing him out of one.
I want to throw you out of a helicopter.
But now I turn it over to you. What do you think will happen in the finale? I want to hear your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Thanks for watching, make sure to like and subscribe, and for more bad takes you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at ThinkStoryYT. Until next time, remember...
He was stopped by barbecue. He died from trans fats.